I didn't just get fined $1,000 for fishing with my daughter. I declared war on Karen Vance, the HOA tyrant, and I'm ready to burn her empire to the ground. The day I became the most hated man in Serenity Lakes was the day I took every last ounce of power from that snake. Karen thought she could bully me with her petty fines and iron-fisted rules. She had no idea I had 50 million reasons and every intention to crush her grip on this neighborhood. If you've ever wanted to take down the dictator next door, listen up. This is the blueprint. I'm Alex Sterling. 6 months ago, I had it all. 2 decades in tech, millions in the bank, and a family I loved. But cancer stole my wife, Sarah, and nearly tore me and my daughter Lily apart. Lily retreated into silence. The only time I saw her flicker to life was out on the lake, fishing, the last piece of our family before everything fell apart. When I said we needed a fresh start, Serenity Lakes seemed like the perfect sanctuary. Spacious homes, a sprawling 10-acre lake, and promises of peace. The realtor, Susan, warned me about the HOA. Karen Vance is proactive about keeping standards. I should have known proactive was code for a venomous tyrant. I found out on a crisp May morning. The air was cool and fresh, with the smell of spring blooming around us. Lily and I were standing on the small community dock, a peaceful spot where families often came to enjoy the water. She had just landed a beautiful bass, a shiny fish that glistened in the sunlight, and for the first time in what felt like a very long time, a genuine smile lit up her face. That smile was precious to me. It was a sign of hope and happiness after so much sadness. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Excuse me, what in God's name do you think you're doing here?" The voice was harsh and grating, like nails scraping on a chalkboard. We both turned to see a woman approaching us. She looked to be in her late 50s, dressed head to toe in expensive designer sportswear. Her hair was a perfect helmet of blonde, styled to look powerful and demanding. In her hand, she held a tablet like it was a weapon, ready to enforce some strict rules. I tried to be polite and neighborly. "Good morning," I said calmly. "Alex Sterling. We just moved into the old Miller house on Willow Creek." I reached out my hand for a friendly greeting, but she ignored it completely, her eyes scanning us with cold disdain as if we were intruders in her kingdom. "I am Karen Vance, president of the Serenity Lakes Homeowners Association," she declared, with the air of someone announcing her divine right to rule. "And fishing in this lake is strictly forbidden. That'll be a $1,000 fine." Her words hit like a slap. Lily flinched, her bright smile disappearing instantly. She looked up at me with wide eyes. $1,000? I kept my voice steady, trying not to let anger show. "Ms. Vance, the realtor specifically highlighted the lake for fishing. It was one of the main reasons we bought the house here." Karen smirked, a cruel, knowing smile. "Realtors," she said dismissively. "They'll say anything to make a sale. That rule was updated 2 months ago. Ignorance is no excuse, Mr. Sterling. All homeowners were notified." She tapped on her tablet, scrolling through some official-looking document. "Violation 7.3, subsection B, unauthorized recreational activity." I shook my head in disbelief. "We never received any notification," I said, feeling my patience start to wear thin. She sniffed, clearly unimpressed. "Perhaps you should manage your email more diligently," she said with a cold edge. "Some people struggle to adapt to a community with standards." Her gaze dropped to Lily's slightly muddy sneakers, making it clear we didn't fit the image of the perfect residence she wanted. It was a silent message. We were outsiders. I pressed on, determined to understand. "Why was fishing banned?" I asked, looking out over the lake, which was clearly stocked with fish. "It seems strange for a place called Serenity Lakes to forbid fishing." Karen rattled off a list of excuses with practiced ease. "Environmental impact, property values, aesthetic cohesion." She waved her hand dismissively. "Frankly, Mr. Sterling, the sight of that." She gestured toward our modest fishing gear. is unappealing to residents who pay a premium for tranquil lake views. I saw tears welling up in Lily's eyes. This woman, with her cold cruelty, was poisoning the fragile peace we were trying to build. "We'll pack up," I said, putting my arm protectively around Lily. "Please send the fine details and a copy of all current regulations." Karen's triumphant smile said it all. "Consider it done. And Mr. Sterling, I trust this will be our last misunderstanding." As we walked away, Lily whispered quietly, "Dad, why was she so awful? We weren't doing anything wrong." I looked down at her, my mind racing with worry and anger. "Some people, sweetie," I said softly, "get their power from making others feel small. Don't worry. This isn't over." When we got back home, I immediately started searching through my emails. Everywhere. Inbox, spam, even the trash folder. Nothing. No notification about a fishing ban. My blood began to boil. This wasn't about rules or safety. This was about control and power. I decided to start digging deeper into Karen Vance and the Serenity Lakes Homeowners Association. It didn't take long to find out that Karen had been president of the HOA for a full decade. What was more interesting was her husband's connection. He owned a well-known local construction company, which, by coincidence, had been awarded most of the HOA's lucrative community improvement contracts. The pieces were starting to fit together. I also found Karen's social media pages, which were full of pictures showing lavish parties at her sprawling lakefront home, the very same lake she was trying to control. There were photos of live bands, open bars, and dozens of guests celebrating. Clearly, the environmental impact and aesthetic cohesion reasons she gave were just excuses to hide her real agenda. The real bombshell came when I dug into the county property records. I discovered that the 10-acre lake and all the land surrounding its shoreline were not actually owned by the HOA at all. Instead, the ownership belonged to a company called Apex Developers, the original builders who developed Serenity Lakes. The HOA only had a 25-year recreational lease agreement, which allowed them to use the lake and shoreline for community purposes. But here was the critical detail. The lease was set to expire in just 3 months. That meant the HOA's control over the lake was about to end. My mind, sharpened by years of experience in navigating complex business deals, immediately recognized this as a major weakness, a vulnerability that could be exploited. The whole situation was far bigger than a simple fishing fine or neighborhood rules. This was an opportunity and a turning point. The very next day, as I was walking Lily to the bus stop, I accidentally ran into Arthur Finch. Arthur was a retired corporate lawyer, sharp as a tack, and he lived only a few doors down from us. I had heard from neighbors that Arthur was not exactly a fan of Karen and her aggressive tactics. After I briefly told him about the fishing incident, Arthur gave me a knowing look and said, "Heard you had a run-in with Queen Karen." "You could say that," I replied, a bit bitter. $1,000 welcome gift." Arthur chuckled grimly. "That's her signature move. Most folks just pay up and shut up. She's got this entire neighborhood in an iron grip. But," he leaned closer, lowering his voice, "if you're curious about how deep this rabbit hole goes, my door's always open. I've got files that would make your hair curl." His words were more than just an offer. They were an invitation to fight back against Karen and the corrupt system she had built. That very afternoon, I found myself knocking on Arthur Finch's door, ready to dive deeper into the fight ahead. I realized then that this game was far bigger than just a fishing fine. Karen wasn't some petty tyrant with small ambitions. She was playing for much higher stakes, and she had absolutely no idea who she had just provoked by targeting me. The battle for Serenity Lakes was about to become a war. Arthur's study was a fortress of legal texts and meticulously organized binders. "Karen Vance," he began, pouring coffee, "is more than just an overzealous HOA president. She's a predator." He laid out a chilling narrative. For years, Karen had allegedly used the HOA as her personal weapon, excessive fines for minor, often fabricated, infractions, selective enforcement targeting residents who dared question her or those whose properties she coveted. "She bleeds them dry," Arthur said, his voice low. Then, when they're desperate to sell, a friendly offer comes in from one of several LLCs, all conveniently untraceable directly to her, but guess who ultimately profits? "And the lake?" I asked. "What's her play there?" Arthur nodded. "That's her magnum opus. Apex Developers is in financial distress. They need to liquidate assets. Karen knows this. She's been lobbying them hard to sell the lake and its shoreline directly to one of her front companies, not the HOA. Her plan," Marcus added, "is to get it cheap, then rezone a portion of the shoreline for luxury townhouses. She'll restrict access for existing residents, jack up property values for the new units, and make a killing. The recent fishing ban, the sudden environmental concerns, it's all to devalue the lake's current recreational use, making her acquisition easier and justifying future restrictions. She's even pushing for a special assessment on all homeowners," Arthur said, "ostensibly for lake preservation and enhancement. In reality, she's trying to get the community to fund her private takeover." I felt a cold fury. This wasn't just about a fine anymore. It was about systemic corruption. "Apex Developers," I said. "Who do I talk to there?" My venture capital instincts were screaming. A distressed seller, a valuable asset, and a corrupt competitor. This was my battlefield. Over the next several weeks, Arthur and Marcus became my invaluable allies. They helped me connect with other residents in the community who had also suffered under Karen's harsh and unfair rule. We couldn't meet openly, as Karen's reach was long, so we held secret meetings in discreet places. Sometimes it was at quiet coffee shops, where the buzz of other customers helped mask our conversations. Other times we met on park benches tucked away from view. On one occasion, we even gathered in the back room of a local bookstore that was sympathetic to our cause, meeting after business hours when the streets were quiet. The stories we shared were horrifying and heartbreaking. Maria, a single mother, told how she was repeatedly fined because her children's laughter and play in their own backyard was considered disruptive noise by Karen and her allies. The Changs, an elderly couple who had lived in the neighborhood for decades, were relentlessly harassed over the color of their approved garden shed. Karen's board targeted them until they gave up their beloved vegetable garden, something they had tended to with love for years. Each story added more pieces to the dark puzzle of Karen's reign of terror. Our group of dissidents slowly grew, united by shared frustration and the desire for change. To protect our communications and keep our plans secret, we created a private, encrypted group chat. This allowed us to share information, warnings, and updates safely, out of reach of Karen's spies. While we built our network, I brought in a trusted former associate, Chloe Dane. Chloe was a real estate intelligence expert, sharp and relentless, a real shark in the industry. I asked her to dig deep into Karen's finances as well as the financial health of Apex Developers. About a week later, Chloe called me with some startling news. "Alex, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Karen Vance is leveraged to the eyeballs. Her husband's construction company just lost a major county contract, and they're drowning in massive debt. This lake deal isn't just about making money anymore, it's a lifeline. If she doesn't pull it off, they could lose everything." This was a critical piece of information. Karen wasn't just greedy, she was desperate, fighting for survival. I asked about Apex Developers, hoping to find a weakness there too. Chloe's reply was even more encouraging. "Even better. Apex is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. They urgently need cash and are looking to close a deal fast. They gave Karen an exclusivity window to make an offer on the lake, but it's about to expire. They're getting calls from other buyers now. The vice president handling the sale is a guy named Bill Ackerman. He's under immense pressure to close something soon." Chloe didn't stop there. She gave me Ackerman's direct phone number. This was the lead I needed to take the fight directly to the source. That evening, Karen held an emergency HOA meeting. She unveiled her grand vision, Project Serenity Reimagined. Renderings showed a smaller, more exclusive lake with a private clubhouse and, surprise, sites for 6 new luxury homes where the public fishing docks used to be. She announced a hefty special assessment, $200 per month per household, to fund these vital community enhancements. "This is an investment in all our property values," she declared, beaming. When a few brave souls questioned the cost or the lack of community input, Karen's smile turned glacial. "This has been decided by the board for the good of the community. Dissent will only devalue our collective future." The threat hung heavy in the air. As the meeting adjourned, I saw the fear in people's eyes, but I also saw a flicker of anger. Karen had overplayed her hand, and she had no idea that the real owner of her lake was about to make his move. The next morning, I called Bill Ackerman at Apex Developers. I didn't mince words. "Mr. Ackerman, Alex Sterling, I understand you have a 10-acre lake property in Serenity Lakes you're looking to divest. I'm prepared to make an all-cash offer, significantly above Ms. Vance's reported bid and close within 7 days. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Mr. Sterling," Ackerman finally said, his voice cautious but intrigued. "Karen Vance has been persistent, but an all-cash offer, rapid close, that's compelling. Let's talk." We talked for hours that day, going over every detail carefully. By the end of the day, we reached a handshake agreement, though it was still subject to the usual due diligence and legal checks. To keep my involvement private for the time being, I created a new limited liability company called Stillwater Holdings to handle the purchase. The agreed price was $1.5 million, a real bargain for such a valuable property, and enough to make Apex developers sing with relief. But Karen somehow must have sensed the change coming. Almost immediately after the deal started moving forward, the harassment against me increased dramatically. I began receiving violation notices every single day. My lawn was suddenly out of compliance for being just a quarter-inch too high, something no one had ever mentioned before. A new species of weed, one that had never been seen in my flower beds, appeared overnight, an unapproved, invasive plant that looked suspiciously transplanted. Even Lily's bike, which she had left outside the garage for just 10 minutes, was labeled a safety hazard. The fines piled up fast, now totaling over $5,000. Then Karen went even lower than I thought possible. One afternoon, Lily came home from school utterly devastated, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she sobbed, "Brianna Vance told everyone at school that we're troublemakers. She said her mom told her you're trying to ruin the neighborhood and that we're poor and don't belong here." Brianna was Karen's granddaughter. Hearing this, my blood ran cold. Attacking my daughter was a direct and personal declaration of war, a move so cruel that Karen would come to regret it deeply. Arthur called. "Alex, Karen just got the board to approve a motion to place a lien on your property for unpaid fines if you don't settle by Friday." "Let her try," I said, a grim calm settling over me. "She has no idea what's coming." The due diligence on the lake cleared. The contracts were drawn up. The wire transfer for $1.5 million was initiated from an offshore account tied to Stillwater Holdings. On Thursday afternoon, my lawyer confirmed it. "Mr. Sterling, Stillwater Holdings LLC is now the proud owner of Lot 3, Serenity Lakes, commonly known as The Lake. Congratulations." Karen Vance was planning a big community unity BBQ for Saturday to celebrate the HOA's successful negotiation for the lake's future. She'd even invited the local news. It was going to be her victory lap. Oh, it was going to be a party, all right, just not the one she expected. Saturday dawned bright and clear. By 2 p.m., Karen's Community Unity BBQ was in full swing. Caterers, a live band, a bouncy castle, the works. Mayor Harrison was there, schmoozing. Karen, dressed in a triumphant white pantsuit, was holding court by a microphone, a smug smile plastered on her face. About 100 residents milled about, many looking more resigned than festive. I let her bask in her perceived glory for a good hour. Then, with Arthur, Marcus, and my attorney, David Lee, at my side, I made my entrance. I'd also taken the liberty of inviting two uniformed police officers, Officer Miller and Officer Davis, for community relations. I walked straight to the microphone just as Karen was gushing about our beautiful community-owned lake. "Excuse me, Karen," I said, my voice calm but carrying. "Mind if I say a few words?" Her smile froze. "Alex, Mr. Sterling, this is a private HOA event." "Actually, Karen," I said, taking the microphone David handed me, "I think we need to clarify whose private event this is, on whose private property." A hush fell over the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice amplified, "I hope you're enjoying the lovely weather. I'm Alex Sterling, and as of Thursday afternoon, I, through my company Stillwater Holdings, LLC, am the legal owner of this lake and the 10-foot perimeter surrounding it." I held up a certified copy of the deed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face went from crimson to a shocking, pasty white. "What trickery is this?" she sputtered. "The HOA has a lease. We have rights." "Had a lease, Karen," David Lee interjected smoothly, "which was set to expire next month anyway. However, due to numerous documented breaches of the maintenance clauses by the HOA, specifically regarding water quality and environmental stewardship, which my client has thoroughly investigated, that lease was legally terminated yesterday morning. All current occupants of this property," he gestured broadly, "are, regrettably, trespassing." Mayor Harrison looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. "Officer Miller, Officer Davis," I said, nodding to the policeman. "I'd appreciate it if you'd help these good people understand that this is now private property, and the party, unfortunately, is over. They have 30 minutes to vacate." Karen looked like she was about to have a stroke. "You can't do this. This is our community. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." "You can try, Karen," I said, meeting her gaze. "But I think you'll find the rules are a little different when you're not the one making them up as you go. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some no trespassing signs to put up." The crowd dispersed in stunned silence, many shooting furious glares at a now trembling Karen. Several residents, people I'd never spoken to, gave me quiet nods of approval as they left. Arthur clapped me on the shoulder. Marcus was beaming. As Karen was being pointedly ignored by the officers while her caterers frantically packed up, I walked over to her. "By the way, Karen," I said softly, just for her, "that $1,000 fishing fine? Consider it waived. As the new owner, I'm thinking of making fishing free for all residents. Well, almost all." The look on her face was worth every penny. Karen Vance, humiliated and enraged, tried everything. She filed lawsuits, all promptly dismissed. She tried to rally the remaining HOA board members, many of whom were now distancing themselves faster than rats from a sinking ship. She even got Mayor Harrison to make noises about eminent domain until my attorney reminded him sharply about the legal definition of public use versus crony enrichment. I, meanwhile, announced my plans for the lake. First, a full ecological restoration project. Tests had shown years of neglect and runoff from poorly managed HOA common areas had damaged the water quality. Second, I established Lily's Free Fishing Fridays for all children in the community under 16, and for adults, annual fishing passes for a nominal $10 fee, with all proceeds going to a new lake revitalization fund. The only caveat for the free kids fishing, children of current HOA board members directly involved in the previous regime's harassment, campaigns were temporarily ineligible until their parents did the right thing. It was petty. It was beautiful. Within a week, 3 of Karen's staunchest board allies, whose children were suddenly desperate to fish, publicly resigned, citing a need for new leadership. Veronica Bishop, who'd once loudly seconded Karen's motion to fine me for my unsightly mailbox, was the first to crack. She appeared on my doorstep, practically wringing her hands. "Mr. Sterling, Alex," she stammered. "My Timmy, he loves fishing, and I've been thinking..." Perhaps it is time for some changes on the board. Reconsidering your position, Veronica? I asked, feigning surprise. How interesting. Well, Lily's Free Fishing Friday is this week. I'm sure Timmy would enjoy it once the board situation clarifies. Veronica resigned the next day. Karen's smear campaign went into overdrive. Rumors flew that I was a ruthless developer, that the lake was now dangerously polluted. I published the certified water quality reports online, showing marked improvement under my stewardship. Her desperation was palpable. The community, however, was waking up. Marcus Thorne, armed with his data, and Arthur Finch, with his legal acumen, began holding informational meetings for residents, exposing the extent of Karen's alleged financial mismanagement and self-dealing over the years. The special assessment she'd pushed through was dead in the water. A motion for a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances was gaining traction. Karen Vance's carefully constructed kingdom was crumbling, brick by misbegotten brick. And the most satisfying part? I barely had to lift a finger anymore. She was destroying herself. Karen's final desperate act was almost laughably cliché. My newly installed, motion-activated security cameras around the lake perimeter captured crystal-clear footage one moonless night. Karen Vance, accompanied by her equally disgraced husband and one remaining loyal board crony, skulking onto my property. Mr. Vance was carrying a heavy-duty sprayer, the kind used for pesticides, and Karen was directing him towards the shallow reed beds where fish spawned. They weren't just trespassing. They were, it appeared, attempting to poison my lake to validate her pollution claims. The video, date and time stamped, was delivered to the police department and the Environmental Protection Agency the next morning. Criminal trespassing, attempted property damage, potential environmental contamination. The charges piled up. As investigators delved into that incident, the ongoing forensic audit of the HOA, now officially sanctioned, began uncovering a cesspool of irregularities. Inflated contracts awarded to Mr. Vance's company, diverted funds, and a slush fund that seemed to primarily benefit Karen's social engagements. 2 weeks later, I called a community-wide meeting, held, fittingly, on the shores of my lake. Attendance was nearly 100%. Karen and her few remaining sycophants were conspicuously absent, likely consulting with their lawyers. I laid out a proposal. I am prepared to transfer ownership of this lake free and clear to a newly formed community land trust, I announced. The crowd buzzed. This trust will be managed by a board elected by you, the residents, with strict term limits and full transparency. Its sole purpose will be the preservation and enjoyment of this lake for everyone. There are conditions, I continued, my voice steady but firm. First, we need a complete overhaul of the HOA governing documents. These new rules must enshrine fairness, transparency, and accountability so that no one person or group can abuse their power again. I let that sink in for a moment before moving on. Second, I demand the immediate resignation of every remaining member of Karen Vance's board. Their time is over. I paused, scanning the crowd for their reactions, before delivering the third and final condition. And third, I paused for effect, letting the tension build. Many of you may not be aware, but during my efforts to protect my interests and this community, I uncovered certain financial vulnerabilities within our neighborhood. Over the past month, Stillwater Holdings has discreetly acquired the mortgage notes on a significant number of properties here in Serenity Lakes, purchased from several regional banks. A collective gasp spread through the crowd, the room filled with shocked whispers and wide eyes. I fixed my gaze on the area where Karen's most loyal allies used to sit. This includes, I said slowly, the mortgages on the homes of Mrs. Vance herself, as well as several of her closest former associates on the HOA board. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Seeing the fear and confusion on many faces, I quickly reassured them. I have no intention of foreclosing on anyone, I said clearly. My goal is not to punish, but to make things right. For those homeowners whose mortgage notes I now hold, I am prepared to offer refinancing at rates significantly below the market average. I looked around the room once more. And for everyone else, the newly formed Community Land Trust will guarantee that this lake remains a true asset for all residents, preserved and protected for future generations. I finished with one final statement. But to move forward, we first need a clean slate, a fresh start for Serenity Lakes.